Greetings at Cheating Story Lab. Share your location below and tell me where you're tuning in from today. Today's narrative is about a man named Robert who discovered that sometimes the most effective reaction to deception isn't rage or retaliation, but quiet endurance and patience. I used to hold the belief that love necessitated displaying one's heart openly, maintaining absolute transparency with the person one chooses to share life with. I thought exposing one's vulnerability was a sign of strength. However, I was profoundly mistaken about numerous things during that time, but my error regarding the woman I wedded was particularly egregious. For 15 years, I believed our marriage was perfect. My spouse, Victoria, was everything I desired in a partner: intelligent, driven, attractive, and devoted to our shared life. We resided in a comfortable suburban home, owned good vehicles, and to the casual observer, we appeared to have it all together. Yet, it's essential to remember that flawless veneers often conceal something foul beneath. It initially started subtly, as such situations often do. Victoria found herself working late more often. Upon returning home, she seemed preoccupied, frequently checking her phone, and our interactions became superficial at best. Whenever I inquired about her day, she responded with terse replies or redirected the conversation altogether. I justified this behavior to myself, attributing it to stress from her job at the marketing firm. She had been vying for a promotion for some time, and I believed the tension could be the culprit. I endeavored to be supportive, taking on additional household chores and giving her space when she appeared overwhelmed. In retrospect, I acknowledged that I was making allowances for conduct that instinctively I knew was amiss. The true awakening moment occurred on a Tuesday evening in October. Victoria was showering, and her phone persistently vibrated on the nightstand. Typically, I wouldn't pay attention to it, respecting her privacy completely. However, the persistent notifications were bothersome, and I presumed it might be something urgent from work. Reading through weeks of private messages on my phone, I realized they weren't work-related, but rather explicit and intimate, not the kind typically exchanged with colleagues or friends. The sender was Alex, suggesting a hidden relationship. Their conversations revealed regular meetings, plans for their future together, and even jokes at my expense about my obliviousness and being stuck with the boring husband until she found her escape route. As I set the phone back in its place and sat on the edge of our bed, the shock of discovery started to give way to conflicting feelings. A desire to confront immediately, seek answers, and salvage our marriage versus a newfound, icy rage that I'd never known before. That particular evening when Victoria exited the bathroom as if nothing had transpired between us, I made a life-altering resolution. I chose to remain silent, not immediately, instead opting to observe keenly. I noted down her movements whenever she left and returned, the deceptions surrounding her whereabouts. I engaged a private detective to trail her footsteps, and within 2 weeks I gathered photographic proof of her affair with Alex, a freshly divorced real estate agent whom she'd encountered through work. My narrative, however, took an unforeseen twist. Whilst Victoria was wreaking havoc on our marriage, I was discreetly constructing something she remained oblivious to. To clarify, 3 years prior, I had begun a side business in consulting, nothing extraordinary, merely offering guidance to local businesses on efficiency and cost reduction. I juggled it during evenings and weekends, telling Victoria it was a pastime meant to keep me preoccupied. Unbeknownst to her, my pastime had escalated significantly. I'd secured significant contracts, one of which was with a mid-sized manufacturing firm that yielded me 6 times my annual day job income within half a year. To maintain confidentiality, I kept everything segregated in different bank accounts, rented a small office space elsewhere, and even operated from a separate phone line. By the time I uncovered Victoria's infidelity, my consulting business was raking in over $300,000 annually. With pending contracts that promised to surpass $500,000 the subsequent year, I had been contemplating announcing this triumph to Victoria, perhaps suggesting we could finally embark on our long-desired European trip or consider a larger home in a more affluent neighborhood. Instead, I opted to let her continue harboring the impression of me as her ordinary, unremarkable spouse with his humble earnings and modest aspirations. The most difficult aspect wasn't concealing the secret, but feigning disarray when she revealed her affair. It transpired on a Friday night in December. Victoria arrived home late, as usual, and instead of her customary excuses, she seated me at the kitchen table and announced the news with the emotion of someone reciting a shopping list. "Robert, I have something to tell you. I've been seeing someone else. I'm not content in our marriage, and I believe we should part ways." I gazed at her for a prolonged moment before letting my shoulders droop and covering my face with my hands. "For how long?" I inquired softly. "Does it make a difference?" she retorted coldly. "The essence is that I desire something else, someone else." I executed the act flawlessly. I pleaded for her to reconsider. I inquired about what I'd done wrong and how I could rectify it, whether we could attempt counseling, all while she sat there looking exasperated as if I was wasting her time with my emotional outburst. "You're a kind man, Robert, but not the one I require," she ultimately admitted. "You're secure, reliable. However, I yearn for someone who stimulates me, who is ambitious, who could offer me, if I'm worthy." The irony was nearly amusing. While she was discussing ambition and the life she merited, I was sitting on contracts worth more money than she'd earn in 5 years at her marketing job. "I'll be moving out next week," she continued. "Alex has a place, and we believe it's best if I reside there while we sort out the divorce details." I weakly nodded, like a man whose world was crumbling. Within me, calculations were being made on how to safeguard assets she wasn't aware of. The following months displayed Oscar-worthy acting performances. I flawlessly played the distraught husband. I lost weight, always appeared exhausted and stressed whenever she visited to collect more of her belongings. I even permitted a few mutual friends to observe me appearing down at the grocery store or gas station. Meanwhile, my business thrived. I secured 3 additional significant contracts and began branching out into assorted market sectors. My initial hire was followed by 2 more, leading me to relocate to a larger office environment. Franchising possibilities became a topic of serious contemplation. In contrast, Victoria found that cohabiting with Alex wasn't as advantageous as she had envisioned. His real estate ventures were experiencing setbacks, and the lavish lifestyle he portrayed during their affair was mainly sustained through credit card use and his post-divorce settlement. Within half a year, he started requesting an increased contribution from Victoria towards their expenditures. She occasionally contacted me not to reconcile, but to express financial stress, lamenting her struggle to sustain her lifestyle solely on her income. She also began acknowledging the stability of our shared life that she had previously taken for granted. I empathically heard her requests for measured financial aid, which seemed strategically chosen to portray me as financially constrained yet generous. A year post her departure, divorce proceedings commenced. Her attorney acted aggressively, requesting half of all possessions. Given the knowledge she had about our finances, this demand wasn't particularly striking. She sought half the home equity, half my retirement funds, and alimony for 2 years. Unbeknownst to her was that during our separation, I shifted most of my business assets into a separate corporation, structured in a manner challenging to detect during routine asset disclosure. However, I wasn't concealing anything illegally. Everything was legally documented and would be disclosed if explicitly asked for. Yet, Victoria's attorney operated with outdated information regarding my income and assets. The climactic mediation meeting unfolded with Victoria striding in, radiating assurance, anticipating a lucrative financial settlement from her former risk-averse husband. Accompanying her was Alex, providing support, a detail I found amusing. Her attorney presented their requests, portraying me as a secretive individual evading obligations and concealing assets. They requested financial records spanning 3 years, which would have been inconvenient had there been anything to conceal. "Very well," I replied coolly. "I have all the necessary information." I passed over a folder containing comprehensive financial statements not only for my salary income, but also from my consulting business. Bank statements displaying deposits ranging between $25,000 and $40,000 per month for the preceding 18 months. Business documents revealing an annual income of $380,000 last year, with projected earnings surpassing $600,000 in the current year. The room fell dead quiet. Victoria's face swiftly transitioned through various emotions, bewilderment, disbelief, then a trace of terror. Snatching papers from her lawyer, she began rapidly flipping through them. "This can't be true," she murmured, then met my gaze for the first time that day. "Robert, what is this? Where did this money originate?" I casually reclined in my chair, smiling calmly, the confidence of someone long underestimated. "It's from my consulting firm," I explained matter-of-factly. "The one I've been developing for the past 3 years. The one you always dismissed as a mere hobby whenever I mentioned it. But you never said anything. You always acted like like I was the predictable, secure husband who couldn't provide you with an adventurous life. Victoria seemed to lose color and refused to meet anyone's eyes. Victoria fixed her gaze intently on the fiscal reports, as if they might vanish if she looked elsewhere. The enterprise has been advancing consistently, I stated casually. I've secured contracts with 6 prominent corporations and am set to venture into 3 additional markets within the next quarter. I was actually planning to reveal this development earlier, much earlier than what happened. You concealed this from me, she asserted, yet her voice sounded uncertain. I didn't conceal anything, I countered. I maintained the separation because it was my endeavor, something I nurtured using my own time. You never displayed any curiosity about the specifics when I brought it up. You were typically engrossed in your own projects. The intermediator coughed and recommended a pause to enable both parties to reevaluate their stances following the fresh financial data. During the pause, I could discern Victoria debating with Alex in hushed voices down the hall. As you suggested earlier, he was a failure, and that comment echoed through our paper-thin walls when we resumed our meeting. Victoria's overall demeanor transformed. The self-assured woman who entered expecting to split modest possessions was nowhere to be found. Instead, she appeared as someone contemplating a grave error. "Victoria," she murmured in a voice softer than it had been for months, "perhaps we should discuss this privately. Perhaps there's still a chance for us to resolve this issue." I glanced at her, memories flooding back of the woman I adored, the woman I believed was true before learning about her deceit and malice. "Victoria," I replied softly, "you made it abundantly clear that I wasn't the man you required, that I was content and secure but not daring or ambitious enough for the life you desired. Nothing about me has changed. I am still the same person you fell out of love with. However," I added, "if I had known about your business ventures, your prosperity, perhaps things would have been different. If you'd been informed, you would have chosen wealth over me, which ironically would have been more damaging than the infidelity." In the divorce settlement, Victoria received her portion of our joint assets accumulated throughout our marriage, the house equity, retirement funds, and mutual investments. However, my business, primarily developed during our separation through self-labor and reinvested earnings, remained mine. She ended up with an extra $85,000 compared to what she anticipated when she left me for Alex. I retained my integrity, my business, and a well-deserved sense of self-value. 6 months post-divorce, Victoria texted me. It seemed that Alex had moved on to someone else as the initial passion faded, and he had a history of doing so. Struggling financially and emotionally, she asked if we could meet for coffee to discuss things. I chose not to reply to her message. I didn't react out of anger, but rather from understanding the distinction between being compassionate and becoming a pushover, between forgiveness and permitting someone to exploit your forgiving disposition. Currently, my consulting firm has transformed into a company employing 12 individuals with an annual revenue nearing $2 million. I am not sharing this to boast, but to emphasize the potency of steady determination and self-regard. Frequently, the most effective response to treachery isn't conflict or retaliation. It's merely declining to let someone else's wrongdoings determine your worth or restrict your possibilities. Victoria saw me as uninteresting and routine because this narrative suited her needs at that moment. She needed a stable, limited husband to justify her infidelity and her decision to depart. However, I recognized my true self, even when she didn't. And that self-awareness, that silent belief in my own talents and worth, was more valuable than any heated argument could have been. The person who labeled me as pathetic and worthless eventually discovered the truth about my worth. It wasn't due to a need to prove myself to her, but because the truth often surfaces when one stops trying so hard to conceal it. If you're experiencing something similar, keep this in mind. Your self-worth isn't contingent upon others' perceptions, particularly those who violate your trust. Instead of seeking validation, continue constructing your life, growing personally, and pursuing your ambitions, regardless of whether others support you or not. Those who are meant to be a part of your journey will recognize your worth without requiring evidence. The ones who don't are not worthy of the effort it takes to change their minds. Share your thoughts below about times when someone underestimated you, only to regret it later. How did you respond? If this tale strikes a chord with you, don't forget to subscribe for additional true accounts of overcoming deceit and discovering resilience in unanticipated locales. Appreciate your attention and look forward to meeting again soon.